So I titled my lesson this morning, Choosing to be Imperfect. Why would I title a lesson, Choosing to be Imperfect? Doesn't that just sound kind of wrong? It would be programmed our whole life to strive for perfection, but I'm questioning whether that's really in our best interest. And do we reach our full potential when perfection is what we are seeking? You know, back when I was a young supervisor, for those of you who don't know my path, I was in higher education administration for years and years. And I had this team I was managing toward the beginning of my management part of my career. And I would often have these employees that were absolutely terrified of making a mistake. You know, so much so that they didn't even want to try something new. They just despised change. They wanted me to keep everything the same. So let's say I would approach a new way, introduce a new way of kind of approaching an issue or a new way of documenting a procedure or whatever. And the majority of the team, they would just dive right in. Like, okay, Laine, we'll figure it out. We'll do it, you know. And there were always a few who would resist the change. And they would ask, could we just keep doing it the old way? Like, I don't understand why we have to change this. And they would complain about not having enough information to try it. And they wanted more and more information as to the reasoning behind it. You know what I'm talking about, right? Kind of trying to stall the implementation for everyone. And they would ask a bajillion questions to make sure that I had thought of all the different possible scenarios of demise included in my idea. It drove me crazy. But over time, what I realized is that these team members were actually perfectionists. And most of them were afraid of doing anything incorrectly. And often they were my highest achievers. They were some of the best people I had on my team. But they had found success in old structures and old ways of doing things. And I think they were terrified that they wouldn't find the path to success inside of the change. And they needed reassurance in a lot of it. Like, it's okay to fumble a little bit, just try to figure it out, you know, I'm not going to be harsh, I just want you to keep learning and growing. And, you know, as I've gotten older, I keep finding this pattern in lots of different scenarios, and I'll bring up one that hopefully somebody in the room can relate to. Back when I did Weight Watchers, okay, am I out on a limb? Okay, back when I did Weight Watchers, I realized after, I don't know, maybe a year of doing it or whatever, they were changing the point system. Now, if you've ever done it, you know they changed the point system. And if you change the point system of counting food, that was a very, very scary idea for people who had been having success in one way, and they had lost weight in that way, and then you're changing everything, and they were terrified. And, you know, agreeing to be a part of this weight loss environment as a whole was kind of very vulnerable and emotionally stressful to begin with. And then you start messing around with the rules, and there was great resistance to learning things new way, and the emotional overwhelm was sometimes so unbearable they would leave. So change is scary to perfectionists, am I right? Right?
Yes, definitely.
But I just didn't want to rely on my own experiences of talking about imperfection as I prepared for this topic. I was curious as to could I find something scientifically based about perfectionism and the fact that it actually hurts us. Because we're living in a society that measures and rewards excellence in achieving status and high productivity and, especially efficiency. Everybody needs to be efficient, right? And that means striving to kind of keep up with everyone around us. And our egos tend to demand that we're perfect. So I'm like, what can I find scientifically? So in my research, I found that one reason perfectionists struggle to succeed is that they tend to work very, very hard, but they actually work hard in an unsustainable way. So perfectionists just can't keep up the effort needed to stay at the level of achieving perfection, and not maintaining perfection is actually harder than striving to achieve it, right? Because once you get there, then you're like, I gotta keep it. So the second reason perfectionists struggle to succeed is more interesting, and that's because they're world-class self-saboteurs. And I'll give you an example from a study that was conducted a few years ago. So what this scientific team did is they brought people into a lab, and measured their level of perfectionism, their tendencies through like personality tests or inventories or whatever. So they knew who their perfectionists in the group were. And then they told each one of the people to complete a bike ride of a certain distance, and they wanted it done in a certain amount of time. So on the first attempt, all of these young people worked extremely hard to try and meet the goal that they were given. They tried hard. But at the end, regardless of how fast they did it, they were told that they had failed. No matter how well they did, they were told that they did not meet the goal. And then they were asked to do it again. Okay, do the bike ride again. And something really interesting happened. The people who weren't measured to be particularly perfectionistic didn't really change their level of effort. Matter of fact, if anything, they tried just a little bit harder the second time. But the highly perfectionistic people did the opposite. They did the opposite. Their effort kind of fell off a cliff. Basically, they didn't even try very hard because they were doing something that they were trying to preserve their sense of self-esteem by withdrawing themselves completely from the challenge. They were protecting themselves from the anticipated guilt and shame and embarrassment they felt in that initial failure. They're like, I'm not going to feel that again. I'm not even going to try. Those feelings were so fierce for the perfectionist that trying again was just not worth it. It seems they were saying, you know what? You can't fail at something you didn't try. And perfectionists have several self-sabotaging behaviors. Not just complete withdrawal like on the bikes, but they also practice things like procrastination, avoidance. So the perfectionists are just really pulling themselves away from doing really difficult tasks because they're managing essentially that anxiety of falling short. So if they know they're going to fall short, they just don't even try. So this study shows that when we strive for perfection, we either wear ourselves out until we stop trying, or we quickly stop to prevent ourselves from feeling the loss or the shame. So either way, we stop trying in an effort to protect our egos. So perfectionism is all about our ego. And, our theme for the whole year is about having a grand rising, a rising to our highest, most evolved self. So I think we should give a whole month of July to focusing on perfectionism if it's going to make us stop trying anything. Because if we aren't rising to our best self because we're afraid we'll never get there anyway, then something's broken in that whole equation. So if we go back to the study, the bike riding study, and we substitute any other activity in our lives where we've tried our darndest to get it right but fall short, and we receive the message that we failed, no wonder so many of us hold ourselves back from trying the really big stuff in life again, or decide that we shouldn't try again because it just takes too much effort to get it right in the first place. I'd rather just stay small and safe and, here where I am. That sound about right?
Yep.
Right. So since our summer of love is focused a lot on relationships, let's talk about a perfectionist impact on that part of our lives. How many of you have been in a relationship where you felt like you failed when it was over? Okay, good. Everybody can relate. So then how many of you have been in a relationship where you received messages from your friends or family that you failed because the relationship ended? How many got messages that you failed? Yeah, you get that message, or even if it's from your own head. So I knew I was not alone in this because in my spiritual coaching practice, almost every client I work with, where the person is single and doesn't want to be single anymore, one of the very things blocking their way is their perceived failure at relationships in the past, a prior relationship. They're holding on to that failure. They know, and we all know, it's impossible to be perfect in a relationship. And we're lying to ourselves when we think that we can. And so many people just withdraw. They aren't even trying anymore. They don't want to date. They're kind of like the bike riders in the experiment. They don't want to get on the bike again. They're afraid to try again, and that looks like procrastinating and asking someone to do an activity with them, or refusing to create a profile or whatever that is online, or declaring themselves to be single for life, and just not relationship material, not dating material, not doing it. And pursuing a solitary lifestyle is their way of having little chance of meeting anyone where they might fail again. Mostly when I'm talking to them, they're afraid to fail again. They don't want to feel that shame, embarrassment, and guilt that we were talking about with the bike riders in relationships. There's no room for imperfection in their lives. And since I already know I'm not perfect at relationships, I'm just withdrawing altogether. But the thing is, no one is perfect in relationships. And it isn't just relationships that get blocked by perfectionism. It can be anything. Jobs and careers and creative pursuits or physical health. Basically, the life that you live. If you're a perfectionist, it's going to be impacted. And the science of mind teaches us. What does our philosophy teach us? It teaches us that life is a continual evolution. But we suffocate our growing experiences and cut ourselves off from this creative force, this life-affirming presence that's within each of us, because we don't want to try. Our practice is not to attain perfection. Our spiritual practice is to recognize the beauty and the possibilities available to us in imperfection. And that's what we can expand, being imperfect. So what would happen if we explored the art of embracing imperfection? What would happen as a practice? Maybe we could look at life as this dynamic and ever-evolving process that has no ending point, where our perfection will be measured. Perhaps our growth in this lifetime will be noted, perhaps, but we're not going to be measured against some kind of perfect standard. Perfection is not attainable, and imperfection is a beautiful part of just being a juicy, messy, creative person on a spiritual journey. So how do we apply this idea of embracing imperfection on a daily basis? All of it has to do with authenticity, for sure. But I have 4 ideas. 4 ideas. If you're a note taker this week, get out your piece of paper. Number 1, set an intention to grow. I invite you to declare yourself right here and right now. I am a growing, learning person. I'm here on this human plane to grow and learn. You're here to rise above your fears and live big. You can read and study all this stuff that we teach here. You can read the science of mind and all that. But I would like to remind people that we're not the Center for Spiritual Reading. We're the Center for Spiritual Living. We have to try this stuff. And guess what? When you try new things, you're going to make mistakes. Make them proudly, but learn from them, right? Imperfection expands our knowledge. Imperfection helps us develop resilience. Imperfection helps us tap into our creative potential that lives within inside each one of us. Because imperfection reveals our authentic self, and we discover new ways to grow and expand each time. Set an intention to be a growing individual. Number 2, embrace change and move beyond familiarity. See, when everything is known and familiar, you're not growing, you're existing. You're just going around the groove, right? Our comfort zone keeps us comfortable, because in our comfort zone, we know how to get as close to perfect as we can, or about as close to efficiency as we can. And if we're taking a vow to practice imperfection and choose it, we've got to give ourselves permission to take some risk and be inefficient and face uncertainty. So can you identify an area in your life where you're keeping yourself in a zone like this is doing the same thing over and over, but at least I know what the outcome is going to be? Could you consciously choose to challenge yourself in that area? You got to wrap yourself in self-compassion if you're going to do it, because things are going to change. I'm going to give you some easy examples. Try a new recipe when your meal preparation feels stale. Explore a new route to a place that you go all the time. And know you might get lost, but you might learn something new. Pick a new hobby that you will be entering as a true beginner. Apply for a job that sparks your interest, even if you don't meet all the desired qualifications. Ask someone new to join you for coffee or an outing. Start a spiritual practice that maybe you've heard us talk about, but you've never tried. And the spiritual practice I will recommend to you if you're wanting to challenge perfectionism is journaling, and here's why. If you set aside a few minutes every day to kind of reflect on your life and what you've been doing, what your thoughts and your emotions have been, without judgment or need for perfection, you can use your journal as a safe place to look at yourself and explore your vulnerabilities. Allow your writing to just be like raw and honest, and don't edit it, just write. Embrace the messiness of the journey, but also the journal. And this practice of writing and then listening and then writing gets you closer in touch with that wisdom that you have inside of you. Basically, this suggestion about embracing change is because we know that change is the only thing that's constant in life. And I found this quote by William Pollard. He's an American physicist. He said, "Without change, there is no innovation, creativity, or incentive for improvement." This is my favorite part. "Those who initiate change will have a better opportunity to manage the change that is inevitable." So we're going to have change, and if we are the ones initiating more of it, we'll have better practice at it. My third suggestion is practice imperfection. Progress comes when we can embrace our own vulnerability and accept that fear always has a message for us, but we get to decide what that message means. Is the fear I'm feeling a message to stop, or just to be aware that something important is happening? And if we lean into those first points, being a learner and embracing change, we're going to automatically step into imperfection constantly. We might be like the bikers and not want to feel the shame and the embarrassment and the guilt. But guess what? Those are not the only things that we can feel when we do things that are not expected. We can also feel brave for trying. We can feel pride that we're doing something new, and self-acceptance for exactly who we are in this moment, which is growing. And my fourth one is probably the most important one. My fourth suggestion is stop judging others. Because here's the deal. We fear being imperfect because we're judging everyone else for not being perfect. I see some heads shaking. If you want to know what you fear is imperfect about your own life, pay attention to what you judge about other people, because you're afraid that other people are judging you in the same way. Maybe it's appearance. I have to look perfect because I know people are judging my appearance. How do I know people are judging? Because I am. Maybe it's interpersonal skills, right? Ooh, they were so awkward in that moment. They were so awkward. I have to either be silent or perfect because I can't have anyone else saying that about me. Your judgment of others actually reveals how you judge yourself. Stop that constant judgment, and you transform your relationship with yourself, and you transform your relationships with everyone else. And Parker Palmer, the great spiritual teacher, he writes this: "The people who help us grow toward true self offer unconditional love, neither judging us to be deficient nor trying to force us to change, but accepting us exactly as we are. It surrounds us with a charged force field that makes us want to grow from the inside out." Let's be those people. Let's be those people that help others grow. Let's offer to each other and to everyone around us unconditional love without judging deficiencies that we see. Let's accept ourselves and others exactly as they are. So those are my 4 big suggestions for practicing imperfection. And one of the things I also was reading about, very interesting to me, is one of the reasons that we strive for perfectionism is because our culture no longer celebrates the average experience. So when I was growing up, and maybe you can relate to this, the TV families that we watched and the shows that we watched, like, they're just average families. like the Flintstones or the Cosby Family, actually, or even the Brady Bunch. They're just average families. You can probably think of your own examples of whatever time you were watching the most television. But the parents were solving everyday problems. You know, the problems at work, or the problems at home, and problems between the kids, struggling about relatable issues at school, whatever they were exploring on the show, it was just average. Like, we could relate to it. Most of us could see ourselves in the characters that we were watching. And our imperfect situations were being portrayed on television, so we were like, that's normal. It's normal. But what's our current culture? In our current culture, it's the extraordinary that is celebrated. The most beautiful, the ultra-rich, the extremely talented. Reality TV is far from everyday reality, but the winners are those who can be the most perfect, or the most unique, or the most talented. And so we're judging ourselves against a constant stream of excellence instead of the average, relatable experience. And when we turn to pop culture for our identity, it's no wonder that we're afraid to try new things, because we know somehow we can't measure up. But as we're trying to shift our perspective to a more spiritual one, vulnerability and authenticity are valued more than status and perfection. Here, we are revealing ourselves as we are, as we truly are, and we're committed to seeing each other as works in progress. This is a perfection-free zone, isn't it, Keith? He knows that. We're committed to seeing each other as a group working to progress together. We're purposely deepening our connection with the divine within us, knowing that this journey of life is for growing, for evolving, for healing. Our creative potential is limitless, and here we remind each other of that. And great possibilities await once we release ourselves from the idea that we have to be flawless. We're here to change our minds about ourselves and what is necessary to feel good about ourselves and our lives. And that would be progress. I want to close with a quote from George Bernard Shaw. He's a great playwright, and he's a political activist as well. And he wrote this: "Progress is impossible without change, and those who cannot change their minds cannot change anything." Let's change our minds about the need to be perfect ourselves and the need for anyone else to be perfect either, because spiritually we already are perfect, and our human parts can never be perfected anyway. Will you join me in prayer? Know this with me. Let's know together that the divine essence that lives within us is expressing through us to evolve us, to grow us, and all of the experiences that we have are meant for our growth, are meant to give us opportunities to learn. And when we are striving to be perfect, we aren't learning, we are existing. And so I know for each one hearing this prayer, a new determination to be messy, to be growing, and also to be accepting of others who are also doing the same thing. I know that love floods over each and every heart, and that the light of God lights our path towards our highest and best self. And so it is.
So it is.